Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's GTCS webinar. Today's webinar is Taking Stock and Staying Centred in Uncertain Times, presented by Claire Lavelle, Managing Director at the Hive of Wellbeing, and Sharon Smith, Senior Education Officer at GTC Scotland. I am Fraser Shand, and I work at GTC Scotland as Digital Communications and Events Coordinator. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right-hand corner. You're listening in using your computer's speaker system by default. If you prefer to join over the phone, just select phone call in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You can also use this pane to toggle between your device speakers and headphones should you have any difficulty with hearing the presentation today. You can submit questions by typing these into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions, thoughts and reflections at any time during the presentation. You can also use the questions pane to raise any technical issues you have, and we will do the best we can to find a solution for you. Please note that the GoToWebinar system is hosted online and relies on our home internet connections, so please bear with us should we encounter any difficulties during the webinar tonight. Materials from tonight's webinar and a recording will be available in the GTC Scotland Health and Wellbeing Hub from tomorrow. I will share the link to this page in the discussion. There you will also find recordings of past webinars with Claire and other health and wellbeing experts, plus a range of resources to support you in dealing with stress, anxiety and the lockdown. I would now like to invite Sharon Smith to introduce tonight's webinar.
Many thanks, Fraser, and welcome to everyone on our first Wellbeing Wednesday of 2021. And it's never too late to wish you all a very happy, healthy and prosperous new year. So as Fraser said, my name's Sharon Smith and I've been working with Claire and other partners throughout this last almost year, believe it or not, to support teacher wellbeing. We start the new year in somewhat challenging circumstances again, and I'm so very grateful to you all, but equally encouraged by you all that you've given up your precious time today to check in and take some time to reset for yourself today. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome back Claire Lavelle to begin tonight's webinar, Taking Stock and Staying Centred in Uncertain Times. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you so much, Sharon, and thank you to Fraser as well, and thank you so much to the GTCS once again for having me back. It's such an honour, it's such a privilege, but it's truly an honour and a privilege to be presenting to each of you today. So thank you so much for giving up your time in what Sharon described as really challenging circumstances. Fraser there referred to experts in wellbeing. I'm not sure I'm the expert in wellbeing, but what I do have to offer you today are some coaching strategies, some support regarding wellbeing, and really I'm going to focus on quite a number of reflective questions around this idea of taking stock and staying centred in these uncertain times. I'll also offer some coaching tools to support you in your efforts to sustain your own wellbeing during these clearly very challenging times. And my word, for many, this lockdown has provided greater challenges, I would say, more so than perhaps than last year. And you know it's bad, don't you, when Joe Wicks has to dust off his Lycra gear again and he has to get back to his workouts. But interestingly, even Joe is only able to do the 3 sessions a week. So I think he's feeling the effect. The body coach is feeling quite fatigued by it all just now at this time, and understandably so. So today, as I say, what I would like to offer you is some space to think, some space to reflect, to take stock of where you are right now with your well-being, with the challenges that you're currently facing, but also to consider this idea of future-proofing your well-being. And that might be quite challenging today, but I want to offer some thoughts around what it is to future-proof your well-being, your happiness, your enjoyment at work. And I'll also look at this idea of breaking the state. When things do feel quite overwhelming, how do we break the state and bring it back to a neutral place to then move forward in a way that's maybe going to be more supportive? And finally, I'd ask you to consider some ways just to stay centred and offer some suggestions around that. So even when we are facing such challenges though, and I wish we had seen the terms and conditions of 2021 before we all signed up, you know, we're asking ourselves in the second lockdown, my goodness, was 2020 just a trailer to what's ahead of us? And hopefully not. Hopefully we are seeing some signs of hope, and it's a very auspicious day in the Western world with the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden. So there's maybe more hope on the horizon for us. There are maybe some hopeful choices that we can also make. Because I think when we're facing these really difficult challenges, we always have choices open to us. And perhaps if we have some hope, not just in moving forward, and maybe that's a step too far, but at least some hope in getting through some of this, then I hope that that's something I can provide some thought around today. But really just the objective is just to reflect on that relationship with work and focus on what can support you at this time. So I thought I would start in a lighter way today. And to begin the session with a little bit of light relief, I suppose as a way of breaking the state just now, as I know some of you will have finished a very taxing and very difficult day with online learning, or indeed coming in from the hubs, especially in snowy weather, if you've been facing that obstacle today. And what I was obviously doing during the Christmas period is very evident from the slide. I spent a lot of time watching Christmas films, and I bet some of you were also doing the same. And there are times when I've come back since the end of the break where I've had a bit of a Groundhog Day vibe. I've been caught up in my to-do list, the busyness of it all, really feeling that there's never enough time. And actually, that's a reality. There's never going to be enough time to get it all done. That is a truism. But also sometimes just feeling that I'm flagging sometimes because it feels like the same old in terms of the routine and what needs to be attended to. And there are other days I can waken up and feel a bit more of the It's a Wonderful Life vibe. I'm filled with gratitude at being able to have a warm house, food in the fridge, and work that keeps me occupied in a way that fulfills my sense of purpose and is aligned with my passion. And also to know that this time won't last forever, that time is indeed fleeting enough to make the best of it. I wondered if you'd be able to consider this question just now and perhaps put some feedback in the feedback box that's available to you. And maybe Sean can feed this back to us. So which film title or song title or book title would you choose right now to reflect your current mood, or to reflect your start to this year, or how you feel about your well-being at this particular time? So I'm going to give people a couple of minutes just now whilst you're filling in some suggestions, and we'll go through some of those just to start in a different way, just to break the state, just to focus on maybe some hilarity, some lighter moments, but also maybe there are some themes, and Sharon's smiling already, maybe there are some themes coming through that have more gravitas to them, reflect where people are at. So Sharon, over to you.
Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
We have Clueless.
Clueless, oh that's very good, yeah, I'm with you there, yeah.
The Hunger Games.
The Hunger Games, yeah.
The Trick is to Keep Breathing.
Oh, Janice Galloway, yeah, great book, fantastic.
Home Alone.
I'm with you there, yeah, I'm doing a proper Kevin.
Last Holiday.
Yeah.
Sorry, I feel bad laughing.
No, any more to come through? It's good to share.
Things Can Only Get Better.
Oh, lovely, yes.
The Imposter.
Oh gosh, yes, aha, very good. I wonder who that's come from. I wonder if that's someone in a new post and feeling just a little bit out of kilter, or just feeling, gosh, I'm at home doing this. Yep.
I'm Still Standing.
Oh, thanks, Elton. Who knew Elton John was on the call? That's great.
The Only Way Is Up.
Yaz, fantastic. Some
Spinning Around, Kylie.
Oh, Kylie, bit of Kylie.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
It does feel a bit like that in places, doesn't it? Yeah, we're living in some sort of strange asylum.
Oh my goodness, It's Complicated.
Yeah.
Frozen.
Yeah.
Happy.
Good.
Always Looking on the Bright Side of Life.
Great scene.
Groundhog Day.
Yeah, definitely.
Fat Bottom Girls.
Oh yeah, couching. Yeah, the couch. Yep.
Always Looking on the Bright Side of Life.
Super.
School's out for COVID.
Wow, that's a new take on it all. Yeah.
Everybody, lockdown's back again. All right. Never Ending Story.
Oh yeah, I thought of that the other day.
I Am a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, in brackets, Teacher.
Great.
These are great answers.
Well, these are fantastic answers, and I have to say, what a flow of them. So
Mission Impossible.
Yes. Yeah, so we've got a real blend there, and and we will come back to anyone's we've missed. So if you want to just cut it there at Mission Impossible, but we will feed back the other ones that are coming through before the end of the session, because everyone's title counts. That might give other people more time to think of more. But what's coming through there is just the sense of loss, the sense of maybe feeling unmotivated, also the sense of someone said clueless, so just feeling what on earth has been expected of us. All of these different aspects that we or aspects of lockdown that we find ourselves having to deal with in this particular time. But there are also notes of hope there, that the only way is up. When you're so far down the road, the only way can be up. I suppose things can get better. So some of these other themes and people realising, well, you know, we're going to get through this, we will move forward, but it is a tall order. And thank you so much for that. I'm going to move us forward throughout the session just now, but we will keep coming back to some of these themes, and I will ask people to engage in different ways. All I want to do here is just to highlight again some of the boundaries and ideas that I set out in one of my first sessions as part of the series of sessions that I've done for GTC over the last 10 months, and it was about the whole idea of working from home. And I just wanted to highlight a few ideas from this again about, you know, getting your environmental and physical boundaries in the right place, in a resourceful place, as well as the mental well-being boundaries in place, and also supporting your emotional well-being. So just to pick up on a couple of things here, firstly in environmental and physical, just picking up on that idea of the online boundaries, which is similar, I suppose, to your physical space, as in what am I allowing to come into my home, into this space that might be my downtime space, it might be my me space. So just a reminder, keep that space for yourself sacrosanct to enable you to replenish. And although there are great WhatsApp groups and it keeps us connected to staff members, to colleagues, there might be times where it's a bit overwhelming, and there might be a time when you want to say to colleagues, I'm switching off for a bit. I'm sure people are doing that already, but just to remind ourselves. Also, a couple of things in the mental well-being box, the idea of feedback. When you feel so disconnected from your pupils and your young people, how are you receiving the feedback you need to get a sense that you are still making a difference to people and to your pupils and to your young people? How are you able to get a sense of making that difference and reaching out? Is it that you need to create, in a rather contrived way, some feedback system mechanism that will enable you to do that? Chatting to colleagues in schools last week and even earlier this week, people were talking to me about how they've decided to make a few phone calls each day to individual pupils within classes. For a secondary school setting, that's very difficult. But one secondary teacher telling me about how she'd decided to reach out to specific pupils who maybe needed greater support. So there was something there about how we create that for ourselves. And also just to be aware of the diet of the mind. I'm very aware at this particular time of the influence of the media, particularly looking at the role of teachers and the role of education during this time of lockdown. It's interesting that from day to day you can get conflicting reports about what teachers are doing and what teachers aren't doing. It's quite remarkable. And I suppose my kind of adage is, you know, keeping in my own mind this idea of, if I'm focused on getting it right for the pupils, I can't be getting it wrong. And then just trying to filter out the rest of that noise and just being aware of what we're allowing into our workspace and our home space every day. And also this idea of just finding the joy, just looking for those moments of joy that are at all possible. And again, in a very contrived way. Maybe some people today have decided to go out and make a snowman or a snowwoman or a snow person, or they've decided to make an igloo or whatever it is, but just focusing on just breaking that state and doing things a bit differently, and knowing that there are some ways in which we can make things feel a little bit better.
Claire, we spoke as well about how easy it is to start listening to your inner critic when we don't have boundaries in place, and actually we can sometimes be our own worst enemies. So it's really, we have to be super mindful of our inner critic when we're in these situations, don't we?
I think
you know,
so.
at the best of times it can get us, but just now when we've not got the resources round about us to help us look at it objectively,
Yeah.
It can be a challenge.
I think there's something there to challenge the inner critic with what you have achieved each day. And therefore, maybe it's about setting expectations that are a bit more realistic of a day. I often talk about the 3 goals of a day. And one of them might just be having your lunch. I know it sounds a rather flippant thing, but there is something about just reducing our expectations during this time, because it's not normal. These times are not normal. We are trying to do our very, very best in these times. And I think just being reflective on what you can achieve and what you are able to do is really helpful. I think there's also something there about with that inner critic. How much of it do you want to believe? And I think maybe later on in this session, we'll refer to some of that. And I think it's just about making the connections, finding the distractions to take us away at times, making that phone call, if when we're feeling that inner critic, sharing with a colleague some of those thoughts, not as a burden, but just to try and reframe it and get that perspective.
Sorry, I seem to have issues with my camera, so if I disappear, I'm just trying to fix it.
Okay. That's grand. So one of the things that I'd mentioned before is this idea of the uncertainty that we are having to face just now, and how we get comfortable sometimes with what is uncomfortable. And perhaps there's also been something in these last 10 months where we've been shaken to our very well-being core, that in fact things have been based for us on a false solidity. We didn't think it was false before, but things that used to support our well-being, such as restaurant visits, meeting up for a coffee in a cafe, going to the pub, all these kind of things, been taken away from us. And also the connections within our schools and within our early year settings and college settings, where we felt we could rely on just a passing comment in the corridor, popping into someone else's department, just having that cuthy word as we walk up and down the corridor, or just even a smile. We're not afforded that at this particular time. So we've had to dig really deep for a stronger foundation and to consider, what is it that feels more solid for myself at this time and for my well-being now, and also as I move forward, and are going to provide me, I suppose, with the footholds that can support me in taking things forward, which is why I thought of this kind of other metaphor, and just trying to make kind of sense of that change and the sense of the difficult circumstances that we find ourselves in. So that idea of scaling a rock face, thinking about what are my footholds at this particular time. So what is solid underfoot for my well-being and for my work, my well-being at work? What is solid? Is it the planning? Is it the 3 goals a day? What is it that's solid? Also thinking about what are my next steps that are going to be solid as well. Somebody mentioned a film title or a song title there about how things can just constantly be moving. So it is thinking about, where am I putting my energy into a next foothold that I have got greater assurance is going to be worth building, and what are my options for that sure footing. Also just thinking about that lifeline, that support, who's got me in these particular circumstances, family, friends, colleagues. And maybe over the last 10 months, it's also shown me who really does have me, the friends, the family, the colleagues who have stuck by me, who have kept in touch with me, who have checked in. Those are my lifelines. But also recognising, and back to that idea of the inner critic, look how far we've come. Look at what you managed to do in this last lockdown. Look what you managed to set up in August after about 3 days, or for some local council, it was only a matter of hours before Mr. Swinney had made his new announcement, whereby you had to come back to school with everybody being back in school and being back in the settings. So, don't diminish yourself in terms of what you have achieved. And also, what is supporting you to keep going? And also keeping your eye on the next, maybe not summit, maybe the summit is a step too far, but at least on the next ledge, at the best guess that you can make for yourself with the information that you have. Speaking to some school leaders recently, they're talking about making these judgments based on the best evidence that they have. And it's very similar for the government just now. This is why we're in the situation that we're in. Based on what they know, these are the results, these are decisions that we're making. And therefore, that evidence-based approach is necessary for us in school as well, whether we are an early years officer, whether we are a teacher, whether we are working in a college as a lecturer.
So, well, I think it's also important as well that we give a nod to ourselves and the change that we find in ourselves in this lockdown compared to the previous lockdown. I certainly know, speaking about my own self, I am approaching things the same way. I don't have the same level of motivation or energy as I did last time. I'm not engaging with people in the same frenzy as I did before. But that's not to say it's a bad thing. It's just a different thing, and that I think we just need to give a nod to knowing if that's good for us or it's not good for us.
I think that's really helpful. It's a great reflection that we may have changed, and we may have changed our approach, but do the new circumstances demand a change? Do they demand a new approach? And I suppose I would ask that question about well-being. Do the ways in which we've approached well-being in the past, are they fit for purpose now in what we know about ourselves? Because if we've had to dig deep within ourselves for that greater resilience, we might have found great treasures there that we hadn't unearthed before, which is something that I'm hearing from people. But I also think for those of us, and I've certainly felt my wobbles, and that's not just from being a fat-bottomed girl, as was mentioned earlier in the title, but I've certainly felt my wobbles over the last few months. And in those wobbles, though, the wobbles always tell us something. And there may be, what I suppose I'm finding is the wobbles are taking me to places and in ways that I hadn't really thought about regarding the wellbeing agenda, regarding what people might need right now. And I hope that some more of these kind of sessions that I am offering are fit for purpose and are striking the right note with people. Because I think we're all going to change our perspective on what staff wellbeing is, and how it's tailored for every single person who's had their own experience of this whole pandemic and the lockdown and coming back to school. What I wanted to do just now, if we're going to take stock and if we're going to reflect on that and reflect on some of those wobbles and reflect on some of those different approaches, as well as some of the good solid footholds we've got, I wondered if it was possible sometimes that we can lose our focus on what really matters, but also losing our focus on what we enjoy about our work. Many of the sessions that I used to do way back in the past, it seems a long time ago, but it was this idea of feeling good teaching well. And it really strikes me that we do need to get back to a sense of feeling good about the work that we do and not lose sight of that focus for ourselves and the enjoyment they get, even though we're in these really difficult circumstances. So what I offer here is just an exercise, it's just a kind of activity and a way just to reflect today, to support a new way of assessing how I feel about my work, how I connect with my work, and what options might be available to me. So this is about, looking at these aspects down the left-hand side. Now, these are aspects I've chosen. These are not exhaustive. Other people might think that they want to put in values in that list, or they might want to put in purpose in that list, and that's absolutely fine. But these are the ones that I've pulled out. And it's about then looking at, well, how am I currently, and what am I experiencing currently? But what can I commit to in order to move towards that better feeling place? So if I just take a couple of examples just now, motivation. I have no energy, it's hard to keep going. That's certainly one of the wobbles I've had on occasion in these last few months. But recognising, and I need the rest and recovery breaks during each day. I came across this book called Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy, which many of you might be familiar with. And I love this idea of work sprints during the day. So he talks about having two times 90-minute work sprints of a morning with a small break in between. Very similar, I think, to a school day in some cases. You might have 15 minutes, 20 minutes. But then what it allows you to do after those kind of 3 hours is just look at what you have achieved. Such a really great incentive to then feel quite motivated that if I've achieved that in the last few hours, I wonder what else I can add to that. Not feeling that I have to finish it all today, but just what I can add to that. I've also got in here this idea of freedom. I think at times when we're feeling the lockdown, we can feel quite trapped, quite literally, quite physically. And even when I woke up today and I saw a lot of snow outside my window, I usually get quite excited about the snow, but this time, because you feel a bit stuck in already, you feel, I'm stuck in even more, which wasn't a very helpful thought to have this morning. So I had to reframe it quickly and think about, well, go out and experience it, get out for that walk, get out for that activity within that snow to, get that sense of wonder again, because it is beautiful when things looking so clean. But I thought about that for people just now who are working from home, teaching from home, have partners, spouses who are trying to work from home, and you also have the children there as well, and you're trying to support them with their online learning. So where's the me time? Where is there any time for you? So thinking about that lunchtime me walk without a phone, getting out in that fresh air, that daylight, 20 minutes, whatever it is that you need. What are the possibilities to do that? That might be far-fetched as well. I'm happy to chat to people about that as well.
Claire, one of our viewers is saying that she feels everything in the middle column there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I suppose I was picking up on that from the conversations I've had with people, what's resonating with them. And I suppose it is about starting to be very conscious about that. There is no wrong feeling. There is no wrong way to feel. There is no wrong way to think about this. But I suppose in making it conscious and explicit on a piece of paper, what it can enable you to do is to think about the options that might be available. to you and think about another way to do this or another way to change this. A good coaching model, it's a very simple one, but it's Whitmore's GROW model. You know, what is my goal? And it might be I need to carve out a bit of me time every day with the kids around me, with all this happening, the Wi-Fi not being great, a whole host of things. But what is the me time? What is actually going to have to give? And what's going to have to be a focus to balance myself, at least for part of that day? And I'm very happy to speak to that person on a one-to-one basis as well, just to go into more detail. But I think making it conscious, making it explicit goes a long way to recommit to ourselves and to do things just a little bit differently. I hope that's helpful for now. So again, it can be even something like a feeling disconnected from what you enjoy about your work. So there's, you know, we've been talking about in our schools about reconnection and recovery. Now, that's not the message we need right now, because we're right in the middle of it, right in the midst of things. But I might be disconnected from my own enjoyment from work. So what is giving me enjoyment of a day? And can I look for that? Can I find that? And yeah, so just some thoughts around that. And I suppose I thought about this idea, you know, you hear this all the time from businesses and you hear it in the media, this whole idea about future-proofing, you know, future-proofing the economy, future-proofing education we hear about as well. And I suppose in relation to that and in relation to that last slide about my commitment to myself and my future happiness at work or enjoyment at work or well-being at work, here I just offer some reflective questions to get us thinking about what might support me in thinking about, no matter what the weather is like tomorrow, no matter what mood some members of my family have woken up in tomorrow, no matter who I've got to phone and email about so-and-so pupil not picking up their learning or what difficult circumstances I need to be in touch with other people about tomorrow, you know, what is going to support me to meet that in a place where I feel I've future-proofed my sense of engagement, I've future-proofed my sense of I'm still going to get enjoyment in the way that I connect with others, still going to get enjoyment from my day. So it's just being mindful of what during your day you enjoy about your role, that still feels good about it, even in the absence of the connections with pupils, which we know is a massive part of what we enjoy about our work, that connection. So how else do I connect if connection is the undercurrent? Thinking about those core beliefs that support us. And I suppose as well, the image of myself at work. I find this is a really powerful question. I've been asked this before about what's that image of myself in the future? So what's that image of myself at work that's most appealing as my kind of future vision? And it doesn't necessarily have to be about being back at work. It can be in this next week. And therefore, what would be the habits and behaviours that I need to engage in now to make the difference for then? You know, it's a bit like the kind of lockdown situation just now, I suppose, when you think about we're having to behave in a certain way now so that in a few weeks' time the cases aren't higher. So there's something about future-proofing our safety just now and our well-being and our health. How do we do that for ourselves at work?
Claire, one of our viewers has said here it's impacted on entering new leadership roles, lockdown and everything. So what you're saying there might help and actually, yeah, perhaps so just now, but it might allow us the time to visualise what that might look like going forward and what we need to do to get to that point.
I think so, and I think it's just we might be underestimating as well the impact that this whole process of lockdown 1, lockdown 2 has had on us and the way in which it has changed us and changed our attitudes. And although we get frustrated because we can't do what we did before, and we need to maybe perhaps, you know, and I'll speak a bit about, you know, that overwhelm and that sense of frustration that does impact on us. I do wonder if we need to, or we can consider carving out for ourselves some of those new possibilities. But I know to do that, there is the need for space, and the space is not going to come anytime soon unless we consciously put a boundary around that. And how we do that for ourselves is dependent on our own family situations, our home situations. I think it is an imperative. In the same way that we eat lunch or we eat our breakfast, it's an imperative. I think the imperative for us now as educators maybe there needs to be some carving out of space for us every single day. Just moving to that idea then of the habits and behaviours, I've used a slide similar about, you know, a Dr. Joe Dispenza who wrote about this idea of breaking the habit of being yourself and talked about how we are plugged into our past. And I think sometimes that sense of frustration that we might be experiencing just now comes from that sense of how we know it can be. I think the real source of stress is that we know how it can be, we know what we want, but we can't get there. And therefore cultivating that practice or that new habit of acceptance from a minute to minute, an hour to hour, a day-to-day basis can be really helpful in considering, well, this is what I've got to work with now. So who can I be today? Who can I be tomorrow? So we're thinking about some of the ways. Routines is something that I want to pick up on just now, because I know that's been a real frustration for people. I've found that frustrating myself, especially when we've moved into a lockdown when we were coming out of a Christmas and a holiday period. It's very difficult to have that get up and go when we've just had this cosy, wonderful, safe time in our family bubbles at Christmas time. And then we've got to come into work, which is still at home, while still facing all those environmental cues, which are kind of sending messages to our brain to say, eat chocolate, drink the sherry that's left over from Christmas. Don't go outside, it's so cold again. So all of those cues trigger those old habits that we have. So in order to change our habits, some suggestions on the right-hand side, just not exhaustive, but just to get us started, noticing where that disconnect is, that lack of alignment is, and think about, right, I'm just going to make one small change, even if it's a 10-minute lunchtime walk on my own. I'm just going to get around the block, whatever it is I need to do. And then just see how it makes you feel, just see what difference it makes. Another thing to do is just to track it. Is there a way that you can kind of build up a bit of momentum? It was 10 minutes yesterday, it's 12 minutes today. Can it be 15 minutes tomorrow? Just setting that. And if it's not, that's okay. But, just see where you're making those gains. And just, when there's resistance, and we go back to those habits of how it used to be and what we're expecting of ourselves again. But again, checking in with ourselves in that place of acceptance and saying, I'm not sure that's helpful right now. Getting back to that place of acceptance and saying, right, okay, I need to release what was. I need to release what plan I had for today even, and consider where am I at now, and taking in some reviews even at a lunchtime to say, right, what am I going to do this afternoon? And it might not be what I planned, because it has to be different. But always checking in with where it can feel good, and noticing where you can release that resistance. Even if it's a new diet, you've taken on, you decide that I have to lose weight, or it's a new running regime, or whatever it is. It's once we gather a bit of momentum to keep it going, we keep moving towards that pleasure, those endorphins, or that sense of losing the weight where we're not huffing and puffing as much as we were before. Getting back to that feel-good place is important. I think, just this is very contrived, and please forgive me because it is so contrived, but I suppose I just wanted to offer this as a kind of get us thinking about some of our routines. Now, I know it's very challenging right now, and I just wanted to illustrate the idea, though, that perhaps even when it comes to our own routine, there is movement, there are changes that we can make. I appreciate that there might be some directives from different schools and different local councils about the expectations about how present teachers can be. But I'm also very aware, in the media recently, I was hearing about, how challenging it is, this online learning is for all the parents at home, and it is very challenging. But teachers are parents too. Teachers are having to deal with this just now. And therefore, sometimes the expectations of when you can be available just don't ring true for you, and can be very, very difficult. So I suppose I wanted to give us some kind of foothold or solidity in thinking about what beliefs can I have to underpin my behaviour right now that will give me a sense of real and honest justification for doing my week the way that I do my week. And here's an example, and I was speaking to a number of people in the last number of weeks who had been chatting about, doing the hub, working in the hub, but also trying to juggle the online learning. And forgive me, it's so contrived. I've taken 35 hours of a week. I've worked on the Sunday for an hour. Please forgive me. I know that doesn't float everyone's boat. And 35 hours. Oh dear. Anyway, maybe thinking about then what is possible, how many hours are possible of a day, and thinking that if I can manage my time and energy more flexibly, it's the way in which I will feel replenished and that I will feel better to serve others and do activities to renew myself, and to have a routine that I feel shakes things up a little bit and suits me and what I can possibly do. So that's just an example, just some thoughts and ideas for you to maybe it's about giving permission. Maybe today it's just a simple gesture to give you permission to find a routine, to play about with a routine, to experiment with something and not feel stuck in ways that aren't helpful for you at this particular time. And also keeping in mind perhaps that belief that everything will not get done. It just won't. But we're all doing our best at this particular time. So compassion for ourselves and for others.
I think as teachers, Claire, we're very, very guilty, or not guilty. It's just it's kind of built into our DNA that when we're not in school, we feel like we're being naughty because we're not in school. And you know, if you were perhaps off sick and visiting the doctor or something, you feel like everyone knows that you're not at school because you're working. Excuse my camera. So I think that's quite difficult for people just now. We've got a comment here from someone saying, I think sometimes parents doing home learning and juggling work, etc., forget that teachers may have kids and responsibilities at home ourselves. Yeah,
definitely.
And somebody else has said that it's much harder to get motivated the second time round and much better routine the first time. The nice weather definitely helped.
That's very true. It's all these environmental cues, you know, we're still in a kind of hibernation mode at this particular time, and we've not got the same environmental cues to get us out as regularly to our schools and workplaces as we did before. I also wanted to pick up on that idea of parents, teachers being parents themselves, and I do wonder if it would be useful sometimes, you know, and it's just a kind of, it's just a point of information for the families that our teachers are working with just now, that perhaps it might be useful to say, you know, I'm Mrs. So-and-so, and I do have children as well, and I'm supporting them with their learning. So just if we could ask for your patience at times, could I ask for your understanding? I know people put it in such a lovely way and compassionate way, but it's also about putting out an explicit message that we're all dealing with this, and I suppose we're in it together. It's not them and us, it's all us at this particular time, and we need to come together more. I wanted to make
about
sorry, please.
It's easy to punish ourselves, get worried that you're not achieving everything that you've planned.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a theme I hear a lot about that kind of sense of, I think it's that sense of sometimes as teachers we feel we're not giving enough, and in fact you're giving everything that you physically, mentally and emotionally can do at this particular time, but there has to be a cut-off point or you'll not be fit for the next day, and indeed that will gather a momentum where you're not fit for future days. I mean, it leads unfortunately to that place of burnout which we're trying to keep ourselves from, and I think when you put it in that context, that's where we can become very resourceful in thinking about what is going to sustain me and keep me resourceful for that long game and for that long term. So if I keep going this way, feeling that awful, you know, guilt about not getting everything done, and where will that lead to? And if I can put a stop in that road just now and consider taking a new route and a different path, what can I pull back from? What can be the core load of work just now? What can I really pull back from? And really, you know, make explicit as well, and communicate to parents that in fact, in order to manage this in a more effective way, what you're finding is X, Y, and Z is working very well, but A, B, and C not so much. So you're going to be pulling back on this, but there will be opportunities to engage in this in a future time. You know, people are doing this all of the time. Other services are having to pull back on what they can offer at this particular time as well. It's no different from us, and we are doing our best, and we're trying from a very good place to do that. So I wonder if it's worth trying it, because I do wonder sometimes how many parents will be led by us because they trust us, and how there might be just a few parents sometimes who have perhaps an issue with us pulling back on certain things, and therefore can we provide something that will support them in their anxiety, reassure them, what is it that can be done? So just ways of framing it. I want to turn to this idea of that relationship with myself and that kind of lens of reality, because I think, again, back to that comment, it works out seamlessly, doesn't it? Because often we are looking through a lens of what we assume other people are looking at and who we are. So we might assume that parents will be very disappointed if I don't sustain this work that I'm doing, and they'll be very let down, and pupils will feel very let down if I don't sustain this. And there are certain aspects of our work where absolutely yes, we do need a certain level of engagement and sustaining certain aspects of our workload, but maybe not all of it. You know, speaking to some parents themselves last week, some parents were saying we're feeling a bit overwhelmed ourselves in what we are receiving, and we do want our child to keep up and to do this. Again, keeping in mind, these are not normal times. And everyone is doing what they can. So checking in with yourself, how do you know it's true that parents or pupils are thinking the worst of you and what you're providing? What real evidence have you got for this? And there might be a couple of emails that you feel that's a bit snippy, but are they snippy because it's the fastest way in which that parent can send a message to you because they're struggling with so many demands? Or is there a real tone to it that you think, yeah, I need to check in with this? And how many parents are sending that, for example? And also, is there evidence for the contrary position that you're actually doing exceptionally well right now? And also, are there other viewpoints on this situation where we can look at this differently? I just wanted to touch on this work of a gentleman called Nathaniel Branden. He talks about the 6 pillars of self-esteem. Quite liked the way he'd organised his book. But for me, what resonated with me was this idea of living consciously. So really, how often am I listening to my body and my emotions and getting stuck? Or indeed starting to make choices, conscious choices, that might move me towards something that just feels a bit more better for myself in that moment, in that hour, in that day. And also this idea of self-acceptance. If we base it on the premise that actually we will never get it all done, then when is good enough good enough? What's your evidence if you believe that you're not good enough or you're not getting it right? What's your real evidence for that? And what might happen if you were to believe that you are good enough for each day and that this is your offering and this is all that can be done? I just wondered if that can solidify some of our kind of responses. I hear this a lot from people that they talk about, pouring from an empty cup. You can't pour from an empty cup. Well, equally, you can't give sometimes when your cup is so full of stuff that's not really replenishing you. And what I'm hearing about just now are many cups full of stuff that educators are finding a real struggle. And therefore, it's about finding a way in which you can empty some of that stuff. So you're in a place not just to give, but you also need to be in a place where you can receive and there's space to receive. I know Emma Hepburn, the psychology mum, she talks about the emotional cup. I know that she's one of the collaborators on the Wellbeing Hub with GTC. And I know that I was chatting to Sarah Phillip as well, who's also one of the collaborators with GTC and the Wellbeing Hub. She talks about using this framework where we are human beings, not human doings, and we have to think about what is it that makes us human, and what do we need to reconnect with just now, because we're feeling less than human when we feel that sense of overwhelm. So really thinking about what is it that balances me mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially. What are the possibilities and choices that I need to reconnect with, as I did in the first lockdown, that can support me at this particular time?
There's a couple of comments, I'll not read all the detail out in them, but they're generalising, saying they're really massively struggling with the guilt of making time for their own children as well as teaching the children in their class, and it's becoming a bit unachievable. Yeah.
So I suppose I would pull back at this time and say, well, what is achievable? I would actually go back to basic principles, and I would go back to, is it one thing a day? Is it one thing a day for my own children that we will achieve? And is it one thing that I can do with my own children, in class, that's going to be achievable at this particular time? And although I might do other stuff around that, I'm really going to focus on what I can do well with just that one thing at this particular time. Because it's a huge ask this time around. And I think we do need to go back to our basic principles as the one human being in connection with our own families at home, and also in response to the children that we're having to teach and to connect with online. So if we need to set a new expectation quite explicitly, if we need to be and communicate that with a line manager as well, to say this is what I can offer. There is maybe some mileage in that. And again, if anyone wants to be in touch with me, I'd be happy to even run a kind of group session on that, if that would be useful, on a platform that I can create. So I can go into further detail on some of that as well. But I do think the guilt isn't resourceful, and the guilt is also depleting our energy. Therefore, keeping focus on what we are able to do. And I go back to that adage of, if I'm focused on getting it right as best I can for the children, I'll not be getting it wrong. Just because I'm not doing everything doesn't mean I'm getting it wrong. And I think we've still got a bit of a link there that I have to achieve everything to make this perfect for our kids. It's never going to be perfect for our kids in class. Never is anyway when we're in school. It's just a better fit for us because that's what we're used to, and this is uncomfortable. We get triggered emotionally a lot. I remember being in schools in multidisciplinary meetings. I remember working with teachers, and we would talk a lot about individuals. We would talk about children's emotional triggers. We would talk about it in a really negative way. What do you think triggered her meltdown today? You know, what behaviour was going on for her just now, or what was it? What was the environmental cue that triggered her emotionally? We also maybe apply it to ourselves. We turn on the news and we feel triggered. We either feel the guilt because apparently teachers aren't doing this, that, or the other. Teachers are working so hard and doing the very best that they can. So that idea of triggers, it made me think about flipping it. Made me think about what are actually the triggers during your day that are your happy triggers. What are the triggers that make you feel good? And relating to that idea of your own well-being. You know, I'm never here to tell people how to do well-being, but I'm here to ask the question of you, what is your well-being for you? And what is it now that you need to give permission for? Because if you keep going the way that you're going, it's not going to be, it's not sustainable, and it's not going to benefit anyone. So is it about drawing up, and especially coming up to this weekend, you know, is it this weekend, a weekend where you say, this has to be done differently now? And here's what I'm going to draw back from, here's what I'm going to pull back from, and here's my core workload, and this is what I need to communicate to parents right now, and to communicate to pupils, and communicate to my online manager and my colleagues, because that's the permission I need right now. Because there's also something about the work that you do, you do need to have a belief that you deserve success, that you deserve you are making a difference, you deserve that you are doing all that you can at this time. Because in doing so, if we focus on that kind of happy enjoyment, well-being trigger, it can actually give us the reframe, the permission, the sense of moving forward in a way that we hadn't perhaps had an opportunity to experience before. So really focusing on what is energizing us just now. Now, I came across this diagram a number of years ago from a Discovering Peace website I'd seen, and somebody called Abraham Hicks had come up with this. And it's this idea of the emotional guidance system. I'm a huge believer in emotions are neither good nor bad. They're just telling us something about something being out of alignment with our sense of peace, our kind of central point. And I like this because I think what it does for me is it kind of describes sometimes the momentum that gathers that can take us upwards. So looking at that happy trigger, it takes us upwards. But equally, we focus on where the guilt is. We can sometimes get into that place of feeling, you know, we're blamed, we're worried, discouragement, a whole host of things that aren't as resourceful as we would like. So I've tried to make this a bit bigger. So excuse me for fastening out some of these slides. But that kind of upward spiral, I'm wondering if we started with something of a day in our work to think, right, I've got a positive expectation that I will get through 3 things today, and 2 of those things, one's with my own children, one's with the children I work with, they're going to be done really well, and a third one is I'm going to have a me walk. Those are my positive expectations. Imagine you achieve it. Imagine that feeling of, gosh, I did well to deal with that sense of enthusiasm, that sense of I'm maybe reconnecting with something here that's really worthwhile. Takes us on that upward spiral. Equally, we have that sense sometimes where it's not going well. We might focus on that overwhelmment. As somebody once said, just about a few weeks ago, said to me in a school session, it was brilliant. He said, I'd really love to avoid overwhelm and just feel whelm. I thought, it's great, yeah. You know, why do we never talk about, oh, I'm whelmed today, thanks, I'm whelmed. We talk about underwhelmed and overwhelmed, but never whelmed. Sometimes we just want to stay balanced and stay whelmed. But sometimes, you know, if we get to that place of overwhelm, we can get to a place of doubting ourselves, worry about what other people will think, blame. We can also get to that place of discouragement, and then perhaps even anger at feeling goodness, and then even further to a place of feeling powerless in what we've tried to set out to do. So again, these are our guidance systems. They're not good nor bad, but what they do alert us to, if we can remain conscious, is they alert us to this idea that we maybe need to change the emotional state that we're in. And I want to take you through a couple of exercises just now that I thought might be quite useful. You know, when the overwhelm comes, it's very real. and we can feel very unresourceful at times. And there's a concept in neuro-linguistic programming and in coaching as well called break the state, which means that we move from a sudden change of context and emotion, of speaking, thought, action, which changes the emotional state. If you think about the children you've worked with, if when they've been upset and you just find a way to distract them, it kind of breaks their state, and then they'll come with you. Sometimes they won't because it's too overwhelming, I get that. But here are some examples even for ourselves. How can we break that state so it brings us back to a neutral place, and it acts like a bridge for us then to get towards a better feeling place? So sometimes it can be just movement. I noticed that in the last lockdown, people were talking about dancing in their kitchen. I hope they've got blinds. But dancing in their kitchen, just moving to another position in your home can give you a sense of just that break in that state, that emotional state of what you felt the day before or even minutes before. So just getting people to reflect just now. I'd ask people just to reflect on a time, and it might have been even today, it might even be now as I'm speaking, because it's difficult to go there just now. But thinking about that intense emotion that you've had or an intense reaction, and think about the triggers that's caused it and what you've done and what you would do to maybe break the state. What have you found that works for you? Is it something that your own child has come out with? Or if you're living on your own, is it a case of movement, going for a walk, or watching a funny video on YouTube, or just, finding a way to break that state? To at least get you into a place of neutral. Doesn't fix it, but it gets you to a place of neutral. Because we, sorry,
I said to you, just to go back to the last slide, Gillian has said it's a Dr. Jim White who runs Stress Control, who talks about feeling whelmed.
Oh, thank you. That must be where that person's got it from. Thank you so much, Gillian. That's really good to know the reference. Dr. Jim White, fabulous. Thank you.
And I've got a couple of responses to your question there about the situation. Conscious breathing to calm.
Great.
And meditation.
Yeah, great. That's lovely. Thanks for sharing that. The conscious breathing is something that I suppose I've spoken a little bit about in previous sessions. And it's a way to get our rest and digest response back very quickly. I'm also aware sometimes that people can find that difficult, and sometimes for some people the meditation can be very tricky, and that's why for some people movement can feel better, because it kind of shakes off a bit of that adrenaline and enables them to get back into some sort of rhythm of some sort of centre point.
Just a few more answers coming in. Somebody said, love Christmas, so playing Christmas carols helps me. I wonder if that happened in August as well.
Yeah.
Much as I'm not a housework fan, hoovering helped break my state today.
Oh, I'm thinking of Freddie Mercury. I want to break free. That iconic scene with the hoover. I've got an image.
Music and movement to bring joy and re-energise.
Yeah.
Look at myself in the toilet to breathe and close eyes. Sometimes I pray. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Somebody said yes in response to something. Pamper time, bath and face mask. We've got playing piano.
Great.
We were planning the session and talking together. We commented as well that sometimes that's all we need, that distraction to break state. Because sometimes if we engage in too much conversation about how we're feeling, it can perpetuate that feeling of negativity if that's where we are. So actually a distraction can sometimes be more useful than a discussion.
We can get stuck. We can get stuck in that kind of record. And I think that's where I was certainly trained in the coaching that I've done, that when I'm asking questions, I've always been asked to positively frame them. So that if someone comes in and they're upset, I don't go to the place of saying, why are you upset or what's caused the upset? There's something about, I can see that you're upset, so there's a need to acknowledge it. But I'm just wondering, what state you would feel better in. It's that kind of moving it forward, or, when it's the right thing to do, obviously, because we still need to acknowledge it. But it's just a kind of way to get people to think differently about their current circumstances and not stay there. So I suppose I wanted to offer. Oh, sorry, please go on.
So I was going to say a couple more. Humour. Somebody said, "Don't think I'm going to get away from my desk anytime soon. You're my distraction today."
Oh, thank you.
And having this webinar to look forward to has got me through this week. I almost didn't make it because it was another thing, but I changed my perspective and knew this would benefit me in so many ways. That's lovely.
I hope it has. So thank you so much. That's great. Thanks very much to my mum there for calling in. That was really good of her to do that. Thanks, Mum. No, thank you so much. That's so kind. It's lovely. I do want to talk about that state idea, the breaking the state. So if we think about that last slide where I was asking you to think about that experience, one of the techniques that we can use, and again, it's a coaching technique, can be used in NLP as well, but it's to think about a bridge and to focus on being at the start of that bridge. Now, it could be the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, or it could be the bridge, that lovely bridge that's over the water of the Tweed down in Peebles. Lovely place. So, you know, what is the bridge that we want to envisage? And what is the emotion that we are standing with on that side of the bridge where it's maybe not felt so good, that negative emotion, if it's anger, if it's anxiety. But to check in with yourself, you might want to write this down, you know, what is that emotion telling you in a positive way? You know, is anger actually telling you, you need to do this differently? Is frustration telling you, this is not sustainable? Is guilt telling you, I can't continue to do this and deplete myself any further, I need to re-energize? So even those negative emotions have a question to ask us or have something to tell us in a positive way. Now, here's where it might feel a little bit out of reach, but consider the positive emotion you'd like to feel on the other side of that bridge, what you want to walk towards, or indeed to run towards, or even crawl, depending on how we're feeling. So visualize that bridge and to imagine the positive emotion state on the other side. You know, is it just freedom? Is it just, you know, catching a breath on the other side of the bridge? And therefore, what emotion would take you to the next step? A bit like that spiral, what emotion would take you to the next step? You know, if it's anger, would it be frustration that's actually the next step? Because I'm so angry about this. But you know what? I'm just actually frustrated that it's working out this way. And maybe that other person can't see it from my point of view, but I'm so frustrated that I have to do things this way. And then, you know, is frustration leading to some sort of acceptance that other people don't know my circumstances? And therefore, maybe I have to speak up for myself. Or maybe I have to voice to others who I know need to know this stuff, what it is I can do and how I can start to take more control. So that's how we would start to kind of visualize walking across that bridge. Now, I think it's really useful to write it out because then you can see the steps and the step by step. So I offer that as a technique. I offer that as something you can try out for yourselves, and I think is a very powerful tool. But what can also come from that then are the actions at the other side of the bridge. What am I going to do differently? And what new route am I going to take from here that's going to support me with that well-being? And I just want to, I suppose, finish up with a couple of slides because I'm conscious of time, and I know that the real well-being starts at 5 o'clock, hopefully for you all, where you maybe crack open a bottle of milk to put in your next coffee for the day, I'm sure. But there's this idea of, you know, just staying balanced and taking that idea on board. It's about staying balanced, but it's not about being perfect. That when we get to a balance point in these difficult times, it's not necessarily the case that we will be perfect in everything that we do. That in trying to achieve balance, there are always going to be tensions and pushes and pulls with different forces, family expectations, edicts from different places for what we have to do now. But we each have our own natural centre point of well-being. And whether we find it in yoga or conscious breathing, or whether we find it in meditation, whatever it is, you know, just take a moment just now to reflect on what is my natural centre point of well-being at this time, and what does it feel like? And really get a sense of, when did I last have it? Was it before my children got up today? When did I last feel this, even if it was fleeting? And how often might you feel this? You know, does it happen every day, or are you thinking, actually, I've not felt that for a while? It's been weeks since I felt that centre point. I feel just frazzled. And then just remind yourself about what it does to benefit you. And I just want to show this kind of last slide in these kind of dying minutes just now. But this whole idea of what is it that knocks us off balance? So I think at this particular time, we have to find different ways of being with ourselves, whether we're living alone or even if we're, you know, surrounded by busy family life just now. There are different lenses that we can choose at any point in our day to start to see ourselves through and our whole situation through. We all have a centre point or a natural balance point or a natural resting state. And we can choose which lens we want to look at ourselves through. We have choice points every minute of our day to see ourselves and to see our situations differently. So my parting comments today, or questions, is just to ask you to consider, which lens might you choose tonight to see yourself through? Is it that of never good enough? Or is it a lens of curiosity about what you want to do differently, or compassion? You know, that I'm going to treat myself a bit more kindly. And then when might you have the choice points that will make a difference to how you do things differently, and the lenses that will help you? And what will also support, what supports your shift and that sense of self-renewal? So I'm going to stop there, bang on 5 o'clock. Happy to take any more comments. I know some people have to leave and exit, and I'm always available. You know, my details will be on the slides. You can get in touch with me. Really happy to support in any way I possibly can. But thank you so much for taking time for yourself today.
Sorry to interrupt you. I wondered if you could move your slides forward so that people can see the helplines available in your contact detail. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Claire, for your time today. I've got a couple of comments I'd like to share with you, just so you know. Not a question, but thank you so much for the session. I'm finding it so helpful. Things are my slides moved. That's why I've changed. Too many people come out. Okay, I'm finding it so helpful and nice to know I'm not alone in my feelings of how difficult things are just now. I'll certainly be using these tips to help my well-being, and have been so hard on myself recently. So thank you. Fabulous, Claire. I'm moving from last holiday to summer holiday, and I mean that in a good way. Just that it can still be on the bus and don't need to be all the singing and all dancing all the time. Lens of acceptance. So great. And thanks so much. Inspiring, excellent webinar and words of wisdom. Thank you so much. Sure, many of us have needed to hear this today, and thanks, Claire and Sharon. Take care of yourselves. So lots of lovely positive comments. So
thank you. That's lovely.
Made such a difference today. So thank you.
I suppose I would just end with my song. It's a new dawn. It's a new day. So keep in mind, you know, when we're all feeling fine. You know, we're all feeling fine. We're going to get there. So that would be my song for today. Thank you very much for having me.
Great, lovely having you. Take care, everybody. Look after yourselves.